When people think of World War II weapons, they usually picture tanks, fighter planes, submarines, and massive battleships. These machines defined the battlefield and helped decide the outcome of the war. But behind the scenes, engineers, scientists, and military planners were working on far stranger inventions, experimental machines, unusual technologies, and secret projects that many people today have never even heard of. Some were decades ahead of their time. Some were desperate last-minute ideas, and a few quietly shaped the future of modern warfare. Today, we're exploring the secret weapons of World War II you've probably never heard of. The bat bomb, United States. One of the most unusual wartime inventions began with an unexpected idea, using bats as delivery systems for small incendiary devices. American researchers noticed that certain bat species naturally hid inside buildings during the day. The plan was to attach small time devices to bats, release them over target cities, and allow them to scatter into rooftops and structures before the timers activated. Large containers were designed to carry thousands of bats at once. When released at high altitude, parachutes would open the containers, allowing the bats to disperse naturally. Testing showed that the concept actually worked. The animals would settle into buildings exactly as expected. However, the project required complex logistics and careful handling, and as the war progressed, resources were shifted to other technologies. Eventually, the program was canceled before large-scale deployment. Although never used in combat, the project remains one of the most unusual experimental weapons ever developed during the war. The Habakkuk aircraft carrier, United Kingdom. During the early years of the war, German submarines posed a serious threat to shipping in the Atlantic. Aircraft carriers were valuable for protecting convoys, but they were expensive and difficult to produce quickly. British scientists proposed a surprising solution: build floating airfields out of a mixture of ice and wood pulp, a material later known as pykrete. This material was extremely strong and melted far more slowly than normal ice. Engineers believed that enormous floating platforms made from pykrete could serve as unsinkable aircraft carriers in the middle of the ocean. A prototype structure was actually built in Canada to test the idea. It demonstrated impressive durability, even resisting damage that would normally destroy ordinary ice. However, the project required huge amounts of materials, refrigeration systems, and construction time. As conventional aircraft carrier production increased, the idea was eventually abandoned. Even so, the concept showed how creative wartime engineering could become when resources were limited. The wind cannon, Japan. Japan experimented with a weapon designed to disrupt aircraft formations using powerful blasts of air. Nicknamed the wind cannon, the system attempted to create strong shock waves capable of destabilizing incoming planes. The idea was that sudden pressure changes might interfere with flight stability and potentially force aircraft to lose control. Early prototypes were constructed and tested, but the technology proved unreliable and difficult to operate effectively at long distances. Traditional anti-aircraft defenses were far more practical, and the wind cannon never became a widely used system. Despite its limited success, the concept reflected the intense effort by many nations to find unconventional ways to defend against air raids. The Kettenkrad hybrid vehicle, Germany. Among the more unusual military vehicles of the war was the Kettenkrad, a small machine that combined features of a motorcycle and a tracked vehicle. At first glance, it looked like a motorcycle attached to tank tracks. The front wheel helped steer during normal driving, while the tracks allowed the vehicle to travel across rough terrain that ordinary motorcycles could not handle. The Kettenkrad was used for tasks such as transporting supplies, towing equipment, and moving aircraft on airfields. Its small size made it extremely versatile, and it could operate in muddy or snowy conditions where larger vehicles struggled. Although not secret in the strictest sense, it remained relatively unknown compared to larger armored vehicles. Yet it demonstrated innovative thinking about mobility on the battlefield. The acoustic homing torpedo, Germany. Submarine warfare played a major role in World War II, and engineers constantly searched for ways to make torpedoes more effective. German scientists developed an acoustic homing torpedo, designed to track the sound produced by ship propellers. Instead of traveling in a straight line, the torpedo would adjust its direction, toward the loudest engine noise it detected. This innovation made the weapon much harder for ships to avoid. Once launched, it could follow a moving target rather than relying solely on the submarine crew's aim. Allied forces eventually developed countermeasures, including noise-making decoys that distracted the torpedoes. Still, the technology marked an important step toward the guided weapons that would later become common in modern navies. The Soviet anti-tank dogs. During the early years of the war on the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union experimented with an unusual method for disabling enemy armored vehicles. Dogs were trained to carry equipment beneath enemy tanks, where mechanisms were designed to activate when the animal reached its target. The program faced significant practical challenges, including training difficulties and battlefield unpredictability, and its overall effectiveness remained limited. While controversial and difficult to manage, the project demonstrated how desperate wartime conditions sometimes led nations to experiment with unconventional solutions. The V3 supergun, Germany. Germany invested heavily in long-range weapons, including an ambitious project known as the V3 supergun. Unlike traditional artillery, the V3 used a long barrel with multiple side chambers containing additional charges. As the projectile moved down the barrel, these charges fired sequentially, increasing its speed and allowing it to travel extremely long distances. The goal was to create a weapon capable of striking distant targets from fixed positions. Construction began on several installations, but the sites required enormous engineering effort and became targets for Allied bombing campaigns. The project never achieved the large-scale impact originally intended. Even so, the design represented an important experiment in high-velocity artillery engineering. The Fletcher Flying Jeep, United States. Not all experimental weapons were designed for destruction. Some aimed to change how troops moved around the battlefield. The Fletcher Flying Jeep was an experimental personal aircraft intended to transport individual soldiers short distances above the ground. The design featured vertical rotors and compact controls, allowing a single operator to fly it like a small hovering platform. The concept showed promise for reconnaissance and rapid movement, but stability and safety challenges prevented it from becoming widely adopted. Still, the idea foreshadowed modern experiments with compact personal aircraft and drone technology. Radar jamming technology, Allied forces. While some secret weapons were physical machines, others were technological systems designed to disrupt enemy capabilities. Allied scientists developed radar jamming techniques, including releasing strips of reflective material from aircraft to confuse enemy radar systems. These strips created multiple false signals, making it difficult for defenders to determine the exact location of incoming aircraft. The tactic proved highly effective and was used during major bombing operations, significantly reducing the accuracy of defensive tracking systems. Today, similar electronic warfare techniques remain an essential part of modern military strategy. Why these weapons matter? Many experimental weapons of World War II were never fully deployed, and some were abandoned before reaching the battlefield. Yet they played an important role in shaping the future. Research conducted during the war accelerated technological innovation in fields such as guided missiles, aviation, electronics, and materials science. Some ideas that seemed experimental in the 1940s later evolved into technologies that are now common in both civilian and military applications. The war forced nations to think creatively, often pushing engineers and scientists to explore ideas that would never have been attempted in peacetime. Even unsuccessful projects contributed valuable lessons that influence future designs. Closing. World War II is often remembered for its massive battles and well-known weapons, but hidden behind those headlines were countless experimental inventions, some brilliant, some strange, and some far ahead of their time. From floating ice aircraft carriers to sound-tracking torpedoes and early electronic warfare systems, these lesser-known projects remind us that innovation during wartime extended far beyond the weapons that actually saw widespread use. They were the secret experiments that quietly shaped the technologies of the modern world, and those are the secret weapons of World War II you've probably never heard of.